Let's move on. We have an important presentation next, and I would invite our colleague Lori Johnson from the California Earthquake Authority to join us at the podium. Insurability of homes and property across our country is a major challenge and in many ways a crisis, whether it's in the Gulf states and Florida with worsening hurricane risks or in California with worsening wildfire risks. All of us know this, and so do our legislators. And so they passed a bill the governor signed this past year called Senate Bill 254, which calls on for a major assessment of how do we address this insurability challenge to create the conditions for insurance to be both accessible and affordable in California. And big thanks to the California Earthquake Authority that has been charged with bringing together expertise and developing this assessment. So Lori, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think this will be really beneficial for people to hear just how the Earthquake Authority is essentially attacking this assessment. And I'll note that the legislature is really focused on developing recommendations or having you all develop recommendations like at light speed. Yes. So in the coming year. And big thanks to all the Earthquake Authority does administering the California Wildfire Fund, which is of course part and parcel of this assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and Director Wright, especially for inviting us to this and beginning this dialogue, reaching out to us and talking to us early in this process. So yes, Secretary Crowfoot set this up hopefully well enough that you will accept an earthquake person coming to talk to you. But just so you know, I also dabble in wildfire policy stuff as well. So let me just jump into it for you. I'm going to step back we all know how the crisis we were facing in 2017, 2018 around the wildfires, large wildfires and losses that we were experiencing. I just also want to just throw in some background around how this was looking from a utility delivery perspective in the state of California. So California law has a very strict liability assigned to utilities for damages they cause, that their equipment will cause. That's called inverse condemnation. Once a utility has caused damage, the California Public Utilities Commission will do what we call a prudency review, which is a hearing in which they decide how much the utility has to absorb that cost itself and its investors for those damages, or how much can be passed on to ratepayers. So that's called a prudency review. These are two things that were going on in which prudency reviews were becoming extremely lengthy, a decade or more from previous fires that utilities had caused. And this was in creating uncertainty for investors in the utilities and also beginning to constrain their capital. At the same time, the global insurance market was constricting just because it ebbs and flows with the economy and people willing to invest in insurance collateral and insurers having capital to invest in products and underwriting. So all of this was colliding at the time then that we had the 2017 wildfires in Northern California, in which PG&E's equipment was found to be involved, and then the Camp Fire, as we all know. So PG&E filed bankruptcy in January 2019. Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric were facing a downgrade in their credit rating, which would affect their ability to raise capital, to invest in resilience, and do the mitigation work we hope they would be doing. And it also risked their bankruptcy as well if they were to face a large wildfire. So the governor's office and the legislature started thinking about options and working with the utilities and working with the insurance industry and a number of stakeholders to come up with options, which resulted in something called Assembly Bill 1054, signed into law in July 2019, which created the Wildfire Fund. And so the Wildfire Fund is think of it as an indemnity fund or a risk pool, like municipal governments have risk pools for the three big privately owned electric utilities in California. They're the only ones that chose to participate. The legislation is more open than that, so other utilities can join in. And it only covers wildfires ignited on or after July 12, 2019, which is when the fund was signed into law. And it basically kicks in, it has its own deductible. So it kicks in after the utilities have incurred up to $1 billion in losses in aggregate in a year. And it is governed by the California Earthquake Authority. That is just because the California Earthquake Authority is a publicly managed but private funded instrumentality of the state. And that's what the utilities were comfortable with and the state was comfortable with in a compromise of sort of a public-private partnership. And it's overseen by a public body in which Secretary Crowfoot actually sits on, which is the California Catastrophe Response Council. The agreement in 1054 was a shared 50-50 funding. So ratepayers are paying into this. You will see a wildfire fund charge on your utility bill if you're in one of these 3 service territories. And that payment we are making as ratepayers until the year 2035 to fund this first round of funding, $21 billion in claim paying capacity in the fund. And then the utilities also put in shareholder dollars to contribute a 50-50 split. So I was at the California Earthquake Authority putting this whole structure together, and there really weren't any fires that were exceeding that $1 billion threshold until finally the Kincaid fire started to losses accrued over time, and we were starting to see them go above that for that first year of 2019 for PG&E, above the $1 billion threshold. Then the Dixie fire, while catastrophic in terms of acreage, impacted, the losses have not been as great as one might imagine. So their PG&E estimates losses approaching now about $2 billion. So $1 billion of that will go to the fund. So coming into January 2025, we were seeing durability of this fund lasting out many years. Then the Eaton fire happened, and that's really been a sea change for thinking about the value of this fund. It's protecting us as consumers, keeping Edison out of bankruptcy, and as uncomfortable as this may be, it's keeping California's economy afloat to some extent, and at least not creating some additional risk. So a very important moment. The Eaton fire is now, because of the way legislation is written, it's a little complicated, but the Edison has settled a court case, which basically means that even though the investigations into their equipment aren't completed, it is now legally considered under the fund's definition to be a covered wildfire. And so the losses, while we don't still have a total for losses, that is happening. Edison has started a compensation fund and is seeking to make the payments directly to claimants. And then there will also be a resulting litigation with the state, and federal governments already filed or threatened to file, local governments, others trying to recoup losses for firefighting and various things. So we expect that this fund will be stressed, if not completely exhausted. And so again, the governor and the legislators started working on trying to figure out solutions for this. So Senate Bill 254 provides both an interim solution to basically replenish the fund with a continuation account that will start from the date that legislation was signed in September 19th of 2025. We will now extend our ratepayer charges to the year 2045 to give us an additional $18 billion in capacity. But the legislature said we can't be borrowing from the future to pay for now. So this is why the study exists, is essentially to come up with long-term solutions, first for the fund and for how we deal with these losses. But also the legislature took the liberty of adding on a number of things and asked us to work with state agencies, including CAL FIRE and a number of other stakeholders, including most of you in this room, and produce a report on or before April 1st. So let me tell you how the governor responded to that by saying, there are 10 specific areas, topics that we're supposed to cover. And he actually assigned state agencies to those 10 topics. I can't read them all to you in the time I have, but I do just want to note that one is around mitigation measures and technology solutions to reduce ignition risk, spread, and damage from wildfires. Another is options for enactment of programs to reduce risk and wildfire spread and catastrophe, including state and local catastrophic event response capability, home fire risk reduction standards, vegetation management practices, community wildfire home hardening requirements, and options for reducing economic damage from wildfires, including minimum insurance requirements, that value all those things that I just listed before, like home hardening and community-wide risk reduction measures. So the way we've approached this is to actually think about the overarching framework for that is in the legislation, calling on us to produce a report that evaluates and sets forth recommendations on new models and approaches that accelerate recovery for communities after disasters, mitigate damage ahead of disasters, and responsibly and equitably allocate the burdens from natural catastrophes, which include not just wildfires, but the legislation also calls upon us to look at earthquakes and other catastrophic disasters, and look at key stakeholder groups, including insurers, communities, homeowners, landowners, the utility companies, and more. So I see this as a very simple question. We're paying a lot of money to do a lot of things, to invest in risk reduction and to also prepare and have the funds available through insurance and other mechanisms to pay for loss after disaster. This report is trying to look at the equitable allocation of that money and if there are other better ways for us to be investing the money we're setting aside for post-event losses, perhaps in mitigation more as one option. So the foundation of this, to me, is the work that you're doing. And the money that is going into that work, and how do we make sure that we really are very transparent about that and talk about ways in which we collectively think we could be making better investments. We've taken all of those points, we've divided them into these 4 buckets that were risk, financing catastrophe risk, utilities, insurance, and risk reduction. We built a team. I want to call out Frank Vivault from the WU Fire Institute as Cal Poly, and Curtis Alling from Ascent Environmental. They are leading our risk reduction team. We also will have a broad stakeholder engagement component throughout the project. We have had an open call for contributions, which ends today. Go to the wildfire site. You can just put your name in, or you can register as an interested party even after today. We are having informational webinars. We had the first one on Wednesday. We will have that posted up on the website. And we will also have 2 more webinars. We'll be posting the dates for those very soon. We want to hear from you. We will be engaging with you through our what we're going to have in these work streams, stakeholder engagement processes. So we're going to be working with Patrick on ensuring that the task force is an engaged party in our work stream. And as I said, just go to the website and plug in as best you can. And even right now, if you just want to share a report with us today, you don't have time to write a whole submission to us, just give us the link. If you want us to review that report as part of this study, we would love to see it. So please engage, and we look forward to working with you over the next few months. Thank you so much.
Huge thanks for all the work that you're doing. I leaned over to Patrick and said, that is some kind of deadline for the work that you have to do. But it is
10 minutes to cover it.
I know.
So,
but just a few points I'd make, and then invite any executive committee members there. You had up on one of the slides all of the entities that are providing information to the Earthquake Authority and its consultants that are working on this. And just want to recognize CAL FIRE, obviously, the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, which is based at the Natural Resources Agency, which we know as Energy Safety, the Office of Emergency Services, which of course coordinates all disaster response in the state, sort of our statewide FEMA, OES, the California Public Utilities Commission, which regulates our investor-owned utilities, and likely others. So huge thanks. And while you're so focused on getting these recommendations to state leaders, thank you for creating a process for stakeholders, for agencies to figure in on this work.
Thank you. And yeah, I had to rush through this, but yes, we formed a steering committee with those agencies, and we meet with them every 3 weeks. And I want to call out Frank Bigelow. I saw you earlier, but haven't had a chance to say yet. He has taken on the enormous task of representing CAL FIRE in this process. And is doing a great job working with us, and also working within the agency. So we are seeking their input and guidance throughout the process. So that's why we meet every 3 weeks. The governor has given the agencies till January 30th to make their contributions. And that's really just to help us kind of know that we have everything that the agencies want to share as part of the study. So then we can go into our final drafting mode with at least that full picture.
Thanks so much. And I should have mentioned also the California Department of Insurance,
yes,
under the state's elected insurance commissioner. Executive committee members, any questions or thoughts on this presentation that Lori provided? All right. Well, huge thanks for all that you're doing.
No, thank you.
And appreciate
for
it.
this opportunity.
And maybe if we
Thank you.
could, just if you can page that last slide with the information around how people, where the websites are and the like.
Yeah, it's cawildfirefund.com. And at the top, you'll see a tab for SB254.
Great.
It has, this is the full URL for it and where you can look at the QR code here, but yeah, just cawildfirefund.com, not gov.com.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Big thanks.
Thanks.
All right.